the amount of times where there was a crisis when I was at Red Bull or Aritzia internally, and you know what? We did get shit over a 24 or a 48-hour period. But guess what? The feed keeps going and people keep scrolling and people have short memories, right?
Welcome to my best campaign. I'm Amanda Lee Smith. I'm the CEO of Monday, a brand insights, strategy, and creative studio in Vancouver, BC, and now also in Portland, Oregon. I've interviewed a lot of people for creative and marketing roles over the years, and one of the questions I always ask is also one of the questions I always ask on this podcast. Who do you think does amazing campaigns or content? And if there's one brand that gets mentioned the most, it's Red Bull. There are many of us who have never once purchased a Red Bull beverage, but are still immersed in the brand's world because no one can compete with Red Bull's content. I'm thinking about the Space Jump, Letitia Buffoni's Sky Grind, where she grinds a rail off the back of a military plane. They've done a motocross jump across the London Bridge. There's just no comparison when it comes to action sports content. So it was pretty cool to have my friend Charlie Grinnel on the show talking about his days leading the sports social team at Red Bull. Today, Charlie runs Right Metric, an agency focused on meaningful marketing data, or something they call outsights. But before that, he was the head of social media at Aritzia, the global social media manager for Red Bull Sports, and he did video for Arc'teryx, among other things. We initially set out to talk about Red Bull's now famous Raw 100 video series, but in the process, we also talked about how to build flexibility into your marketing budget so you can capitalize on a cultural moment. We talked about the biggest mistakes that brands make when they're planning their organic social, and we talked about how to set up a content series for potential virality. Honestly, conversations with Charlie are never boring, and I always learn something, and I think you'll feel the exact same way. That's why I hit record a little early to catch his thoughts on brand naming.
Well, there's two things that come to mind. Number one, I am an Arc'teryx whore. I spend so much money there.
Yeah.
And I couldn't, my Gamma MX hoodie, that's the worst name ever. The product is gangster.
Yeah.
It's amazing. But I'm like, the naming sucks, but I don't care because the product is so good. And
yeah.
I also go back to the naming thing. Aritzia is called Aritzia because it's A in the phone book. That's where it all started from. And when I was still working there, I went down and I was speaking at a conference in Austin, Texas. And I walk up and I have my badge and I'm in the happy hour. And this woman comes up, she kind of looks down at my badge and she goes, "Oh my God, me and my girls love Artesia." Proof that a name doesn't matter. Anyway, different show. Different show. I know I should care about these things, but I'm like, it does not matter. What matters is the story behind it and the quality of the product. Okay, Charlie Grinnel, you came up as a video guy, and now I would say you are solidly a data guy with some serious social media pedigree. Maybe high level, walk us through how you got your start and then ended up managing social media at arguably one of the world's greatest content brands, Red Bull. So I think any typical marketer, they'll say they fell into it ass backwards, right? No one who works in marketing actually went to school, got a marketing degree, and kind of went through that. They kind of just tumble into it.
What is a marketing degree?
What is a marketing degree, right? Who knows? In my case, my gateway was through video production, actually. So I grew up really involved in the action sports community. I grew up skiing, mountain biking, and just kind of being around those cultures. And so I actually went to university, and my original plan was to probably do a poli-sci or economics degree and then go to law school because that's what sounded good to my parents, and me looking up to my parents being like, oh yeah, that's what you do. And I ended up at a university in Vancouver. I dropped out after my first month. I was in a really bad car accident, hit by a drunk driver. Anyway, long story short, educational and sporting career. I was a scholarship football player. That kind of went out the window, and I got into picking up a camera. And so I started filming a lot of my friends who were, still going through their athletic careers, specifically in action sports. And that ended up landing me kind of filming and starting to interact with marketing departments, right? Because it's like, oh, we have this athlete, we need them filmed, and can you create this video for me? And then we're going to do this marketing thing. And so I was really fortunate that I was able to do that at some fairly big brands. I got to do some work with Nike. I got to do some work with NBC Sports. And then I ended up in-house at Arc'teryx on the brand team. And that's kind of when I started to make the shift into digital marketing, was while I was working at Arc'teryx. And, this is like circa 2010, 2011, right? So like Instagram is here, Facebook is here. A lot of it was like photo, but then like video started to happen. And all of a sudden, a lot of marketing became like video. It wasn't just this kind of random, oh, you have a video that sits on your website. So I started to really kind of get this itch of, I know production, I know how to shoot something, I know how to edit something, but I don't understand distribution. And I was just thinking that, this device now, this phone, is becoming the television. So I need to learn everything about how people consume on these devices. And so I ended up going back to school. I did a short certificate program at a university here in Vancouver, Simon Fraser University. I ended up leaving Arc'teryx, going to Invoke, which is the digital agency that's known for spawning Hootsuite, the social media management tool. And all while I was kind of doing this, I was still shooting freelance on weekends for Red Bull. And I always was talking to the team there and saying like, hey, if there's ever a job available, let me know. I would love to get involved. And yeah, one day they phoned me and said, would you move to Toronto? And I said, for what? And they said, a job, you idiot. And so I ended up packing my bags 2 weeks later and moving to Toronto. I had never been to Toronto. So I was there for almost 3 years, and I was working on a team that managed the brand's digital footprint in Canada, which was amazing. And then after almost 3 years there, I ended up getting another call from the global HQ in Salzburg, Austria. And my contact there said, hey, would you ever move to Salzburg? And I said, for what? And they said, a job, you idiot. I'm like, oh, this is a bit of a theme. And so I ended up moving to Salzburg, and my role was global head of social sports. So basically anything that Red Bull did on their main global channels at Red Bull that came from their sports side of the business, their sports and their culture, my team was tasked with kind of running and triaging and organizing all of that. So anything from an athlete perspective, event perspective, and then also how does the channel strategy work for all the different sub brands? So, Red Bull Racing, their MLS teams, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, I was in Austria, doing that. And then I ended up moving back home to Vancouver. And I landed at Aritzia as head of social, which is, I always chuckle, is kind of wild because look at me, I probably don't strike you as an Aritzia girl. I grew up around the brand, obviously know about it being from Canada and from Vancouver specifically. And so, yeah, was there for a little while. And then my co-founder, Evan, and I started talking about, we wanted to start a company. We had some ideas for things. And that's kind of how we started Right Metric. And so as I'm kind of talking through this journey, I went from the creative side of things, video production, into the kind of day-to-day marketing, publishing, that side of things, and then into more of the strategy, analytics, insights type of thing. Because what I realized is the way that you can build better inputs to get better outputs is by looking at the data behind the scenes there. So I think it's worth calling out. I am not a stats major. I am not a math guy. If you looked at my high school report cards, you would see, what is the thing? Charlie is a very valued member of our classroom. Charlie tries really hard. Charlie needs to focus more and do extra work to ensure that he's grasping the concepts. So I always joke now, it's pretty ironic to see that I work kind of more on this data and research side than on the creative side.
Do you think, going back to your comment about not being the typical Aritzia girl, and for our non-female listeners, Aritzia, women's only, very popular kind of like workwear and casual wear brand based here in Vancouver. Do you think that experience of being a total fish out of water is what helped you see the need for what you're doing now?
Absolutely. I think that, I said this when I was interviewed to join the company. They asked me like, hey, point blank during the interview process, you don't know anything about fashion. And I was like, thanks, Tips. Like, yeah. But that's not the reason why you should hire me. You should hire me because you don't need another fashion person in your organization. You need an internet person in your organization. And what I was really saying there was you need someone who can dig into the numbers behind what's actually happening on the internet. So whether that's how audiences are behaving, what competitors are doing, cultural trends, that sort of thing, it's a different language. And so, that was kind of how I positioned it. And I think what was really interesting to me was I was able to start to, I just started by going, hey, I know nothing about this space. How can I start to dig into all of the information at my fingertips and start to make sense of it? And so once you start to dig into that stuff, you start to see patterns, you start to see trends, you start to see behaviors. And as you start to kind of stress test that against some of the more, gut feeling type things, you can start to see a lot of similarities, but you can also start to see a ton of differences, right? So yeah, it was really interesting for me. And that was really, we were doing a lot of looking at data when I was at Red Bull. Believe it or not, it's not just, hey, let's go make some random cool shit and like hope it goes well. There actually is a lot of thought that goes into it and looking into different signals. And I took the same approach to Aritzia.
Amazing. Okay, there's probably a whole other episode we could do about being the male social lead at a women's fashion brand. But we're going to talk about Red Bull today because you were part of a bunch of cool initiatives, but one that really had traction and has stood the test of time. So you and your team at Red Bull invented this video format that went viral, the Raw 100 video format, and it sort of became this template for all kinds of athletes to share their sport. Explain what Raw 100 is and where did that idea come from?
Yeah. So basically every year we would go through an annual business planning cycle. So this is 2014. So this is 11 years ago when this is being recorded. So this is a long time ago. And at the time, we at Red Bull, we were tasked with creating a repeatable content format that we could use across different disciplines. So I'm going to break that down a little bit. We had many different audiences that we tried to reach, right? Red Bull was trying to talk to mountain bikers, snowboarders, break dancers, artists, right? Like the audience is everybody. But we had it bucketed into these like specific things. So we were a small team in Canada and we needed a way to come up with what is a content format that we could use and kind of repeat across these different channels that Red Bull could kind of like quote unquote own, but that we also think could drive performance. And when we said drive performance, basically we wanted to drive views. So we started more on the sports side of things and we were thinking through like, okay, what are the things that we should start to look at? And so we actually did some anecdotal research and we started in a few different spaces. We started in mountain biking, we started in skiing, we started in snowboarding. And what we did was there was different websites that we would go to and, we're talking 2014 here. So it was like, okay, we went to pinkbike.com and we went to newschoolers.com and we went to transworld.com and they had like the video pages on their website where you could click videos and it would list the videos. And what you could do is you could filter by views. So, this is pre all the tooling that we have today. So what we did was we went to those things and we kind of filtered by what are the ones getting the most views. And then we started to watch those videos. So we watched all these, the top 10 or top 20 videos on New Schoolers, the top 10 or top 20 videos on Pink Bike, top 10 or top 20 videos on Transworld, because we were like, okay, we need to have some sort, is there common trends and patterns that we can see across these audiences that we are trying to reach? So as we started to watch, what we realized was there was this trend in action sports filmmaking at the time where everyone had just got these slow motion cameras. So everything was slow motion and all of the music in every video was like dead mouse dubstep. And it was kind of this cliche where it's like, oh, here's another video where like something's in slow motion that doesn't need to be in slow motion, but it looks cool. So like, there it is. And so we were like, oh, that's kind of like cliche. That was like our gut feeling to that. And we were like, what if we did the opposite? And then what we noticed was, okay, if we did something that was raw, so it was no slow motion, no music, and then, these videos were too long at that time. It was like they're 6 minutes when like the video could really be 2 minutes. Could we actually see trends on length and tie that to performance? And so we were like, okay, so we start to look at all this stuff. And then we go, what we noticed was there was actually some outliers of these raw type videos that would be in the top 20. So on Pink Bike, there might be 2 out of the top 20 that were more of these raw style. And we were like, huh, that's interesting. And then we'd see the same thing on Transworld. And then we'd see the same thing on New Schoolers. And so again, we were like, is there something there? So then we were like, okay, how can we pull this into a format that we can name and own? And so literally we just started throwing names around, and we were like, okay, like, what if we call it Raw 100? Raw video, 100 seconds long, no slow motion, no music, off you go. And we were like, yeah, that sounds good. And candidly, we like rammed it into some presentation slides and put it into our business plan. So like, it like, you know, and we didn't know it was going to go as big as it did. So cool. It gets approved. So we have some budget there. And so what we did was we actually, since we're such a small team and we had such limited budgets, we went out to our network of people and said, we actually don't want you to film anything net new. We want you to, here's the format. You can choose if you want, we're going to give you a teeny tiny amount of money. I think it was like $1,000 at the time. So we were like, hey, filmmaker, here's this format. We want you to create a video for us. You can go out and film something, or you can choose, take old footage of yours and just cut something together and make this video for us. And in exchange, we will publish the video so that you'll get awareness, and we'll do a profile about you as the filmmaker on redbull.com. And that was kind of the value exchange. And then we were kind of like, hey, and if it goes well, like there could be more here. So we did that, I think, with like 5 or 7 filmmakers. And the one athlete that really took this to the extreme is a mountain biker named Brandon Semenuk. And so Brandon Semenuk and the filmmaker, Rupert Walker, they took this thing, and instead of just taking some old footage, like they went out and did a huge shoot that like we didn't ask them to do. And then they kind of turned around and were like, hey, check out this video. And we were just like, oh my God, like this is going to break the internet. And they were like, yeah, we've just like kind of done it like that. So we release it and like it starts to go. And we were just like, whoa. So we then had flexibility in our budget where it was like, cool, how can we actually like do dedicated shoots into this format? Because now we have an example of like, okay, one has performed well. Will more perform well? So that was kind of like how it started. And then it just started to snowball from there. So we started doing them with more athletes. Then different Red Bull countries started to do their own. So like we made this at Red Bull in Canada, but then, you know, Red Bull Germany, Red Bull UK, all these different countries were like, we want to do a Raw 100. And they started putting that in their business plans that were going to the global level. And then what was interesting is like you started to see other brands create them. So I think like I'd have to look back, like Trek did a Raw 100 and Specialized did a Raw 100. And you're like, okay, that's cool that they're like taking this content format and like doing it. And I think now, like if I look at the data, I think I had the team look at the data last year, we're talking like over 300 or 400 million video views. Yeah. So like it is, and probably, you know, if some of that stuff was re-released now on TikTok, like, yeah, it's probably going to go even higher than that. So that's kind of how it all started. It just kind of snowballed from there. And yeah, it then, you know, became this thing that kind of stood the test of time. Athletes were wanting to do, different brands were wanting to do. And for us, from a marketing perspective, we thought it was brilliant because like the brand travels with it, right? So, okay, people hear this word Raw 100. It's not Red Bull Raw 100, but it's a Raw 100. And people go, oh, what's that? Oh, it's this thing that Red Bull did. So we were actually able to position our brand near this thing. And if they Googled Raw 100, since we had been publishing the most of these, naturally they're going to come to our ecosystem.
Okay, I'm hearing some interesting things that would be takeaways for me. The first one is starting with this concept of repeatable content. That was like where you went in with this idea of repeatable content, making it something that you own, which is honestly as simple as giving it a name. You gave it a name.
Totally.
And we were talking before we recorded the power of a name. It doesn't even have to be anything special. You just have to give it a name that's yours and ownable. Yep. In this case, it's descriptive, which really helps. Yep. You did some rudimentary data collection. Like there was none of the sophistication. You literally just went to see what was out there, codified it, took some notes, and saw what kind of raised to the top. And it looks like there was a glimmer of a trend. Like there was a little bit of a trend that you're like, okay, there's enough there that we can go on. And then when you're actually producing the content, there's a value exchange. So you're giving these filmmakers a huge platform and $1,000 to essentially do an edit. You know, you're just asking for an edit, really. Sure, some of them over-delivered, and I'm sure it really served them. Actually, I'm really curious, the filmmaker who did the original one, any idea what that did for their careers?
I mean, Rupert was already super talented, and him and Brandon had their company called Revel Co, I believe it's called. But like, yeah, he's shot big car commercials and all that sort of stuff. Like, once you're able to say, oh yeah, here's this thing I produced, and I think that's what most filmmakers do is they go, here's this thing I produced, and it's a nice thing that they produced. But if they can go, oh, and by the way, here's how many millions of views it has, that from a marketing perspective is going to get you more work. Right? As a filmmaker who is trying to produce content for marketing. So, there was definitely a tailwind there. But like a lot of the filmmakers that we reached out to were already really talented, really credible in the different scenes that we worked in. So, yeah.
We've talked about this campaign in the past, and I'm hearing it as you're talking about it. There was a lot of sort of like flexibility and just jumping on something right away. And as it gained traction, being able to jump on it more, and then other teams jumping on it. And I know there's just like flexibility is so much a core part of running social media, and you have to be able to respond to, or in some cases be creating the zeitgeist. But at a brand as big as Red Bull, there's probably like a clear mandate, and there's set product drops, and there's like really meticulous go-to-market strategies. How do you, as a person that's leading social media, maintain flexibility while also kind of meeting all the expectations of a content calendar?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I think it's not exclusively a challenge to Red Bull or Aritzia or any brand. Every brand figures this out, right? Or struggles with this, right? It's a matter of how can we set our structure so that it's built to be able to accommodate that. Similar to how a building is built to naturally sway when an earthquake happens. Same kind of principle here. So I think about, whether you like it or not, there is going to be the marketing calendar that you have to participate in. Now, I've had this at every brand that I've worked at where you're like, I can't believe we're still doing this, but like, we just have to do it. It is what it is. I call those tent poles, right? So you're going to need to like lock in those tent poles, and those are kind of those core moments. And if you think about, I think there's that like life analogy where it's like, put your rocks in first, then your pebbles, then your sand, and then by the end of it, you have that full, right? Whereas if you fill it with sand, you fill it with pebbles first, you can't get the big rocks in. So I think about tent poles as like, those are the kind of tent poles that need to be put in the ground throughout the year. Fine, right? But then you need to leave space to be agile and be flexible. And I think this is something that we did really well at Red Bull was, we spent a ton of time getting really, really creative with our budgets and our resourcing to have as much flexibility as possible. So what is it? Plans are useless, but planning is invaluable. So we had a plan at the beginning of the year, but as soon as the year started, if there was something that happened in the marketplace where we were like, we want to, you know what? We were going to do that. We're going to completely scrap that, and we're going to take that over here and do this. We would do it. Right. And we wanted to build the operational aspect and the financial aspect of our business so that we could do that. Now, some people in finance probably don't like that because they're sitting there being like, no, you told me you were going to spend this $100,000 on this thing. And now a month before or 2 months before or 3 months before, you're saying you want to take 80,000 of that over here and that you're going to make it up like you're constantly having to reset. And my response to that is welcome to marketing. As much as we want to be organized. And so I think about, you need to have that agility built in. So what we were actually doing was we would park budget in line items that we fully knew were basically code word for us to kind of steal from different things. We would just get it approved by the finance team. They'd be like, oh yeah, that sounds good. And then, what do you know? We would get down through the year and we're like, this isn't relevant. We have to change and pivot over here and make use of our resources, right? So I think that that's a really smart strategy, because it's one thing to be able to react fast. It's another thing to be able to react fast with some significant weight behind you. And I think that's something that we as Red Bull were really good at doing. And I think they're still good at doing that, right? They see something and it's not like, let's try this off the side of our desks. They're like, oh no, this is a big thing. Boom, we are going to go do it. And by the way, we're not going to kind of mess around and like tiptoe into it. We're going to come in and like own the thing and like blow it out of the water.
And you're not begging for budget from someone because it's already there.
And exactly, right? And you're not necessarily like, maybe you're just like kind of coming in with authority. Now, I think some of that is like the DNA of the brand and the people that work there. So, that has to come from the top down. That's like intrinsically built into the culture. But I think the case study is look at that business, right? It is what it is for a reason because they went like that. So yeah, I think it's about having that flexibility, and being able to react to things. And the way, like operationally, the way that you set things up to be able to react is you need to kind of pre-clear or set up guardrails. So, and what I'm not saying is we need to have all of our copy pre-approved for da-da-da-da-da, or we need to have all of these images locked off by the creative director or whatever, right? And this is something that I got into when I was working at Aritzia. Like we did something fast. The creative director didn't see it and didn't like it, but guess what? Our girl liked it. Our audience liked it. So does it matter? Right? Is it, and guess what? It was on brand, right? Then now we're just talking ego. From like a marketing perspective. And so I think it's about what are the rules of engagement that allow us to have the flexibility and be creative. And is everything going to be perfect? Absolutely not. Welcome to life. Welcome to business. Welcome to marketing. So I think that, how can you create that ecosystem where operationally, aesthetically, creatively, from a team dynamic perspective, you need to be fluid like that. And I always make the joke. I'm like, if you want a job where you go to work for the next 25 years and collect a pension and do the same thing over and over again, the door's to the right. Go work in finance. Go work at the railway. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that is not marketing. Like, the stuff that we do today in 3 months from now could be completely irrelevant. Think about it. There is a team, Mr. Beast, the biggest YouTuber in the world. Mr. Beast has a thumbnail team. I'll say it again. He has a thumbnail team. All they do is sit there and make YouTube thumbnails. And it's not one person, it is a team.
And they're probably iterating on each episode over and over again.
Each episode gets multiple thumbnails. Okay? 10 years ago, no one was thinking about what the fucking thumbnail was going to be on YouTube. No. Right? So like, that's marketing, right? So like, we are going, like the stuff that we do today might not be relevant tomorrow, but that's what's part of what draws us into it. So, I think there needs to be that flexibility there. And that's tough though, right? Yeah. Because when you think about COO type people or CFO type, like operational type people, what they're trying to do is plan in a little box, right? And finance is all about like structure and whatever. Now, marketing needs to have that structure, but there needs to be that flexibility within the structure. So that's why I use the analogy of the building needs to be able to kind of sway back and forth because there is going to be an earthquake.
Yeah. There's so many things that I want to dive into from what you just said. A passing remark that you made about the creative director, I love because, I have a very talented creative director who acts very quickly, but in general, that's often the thing that slows things down is getting approval from kind of like the brand manager, the person that's controlling things. And that can be the thing that stops you from having that one viral piece of content if you have to act really quickly, like the hierarchies of approval. And I think having really strong brand guidelines that everyone has been deeply onboarded to means you should be able to trust anyone that you've put in a position of, creative execution to adhere to it and respond quickly.
Totally. And I think that something that we have to remember is no one cares as much as you do. So like, is this going to be completely detrimental to the brand? Probably not. Like, really, I think maybe when cancel culture was kind of like fully coming up, sure. However, I actually think the pendulum, us as society, has swung back more where it's like nothing is ever as good or as bad as it seems. Yeah. Right. So I actually think that ship has sailed. So I would stand by that. The other thing is that the amount of times where there was a crisis when I was at Red Bull or Aritzia internally, and you know what? We did get shit over a 24 or a 48-hour period. But guess what? The feed keeps going and people keep scrolling and people have short memories. Right? Remember #delete Facebook? Remember how pissed off everybody was? Yet, it's still one of the most used things on the planet. Yeah. Right? So it's like, I just think that, yes, that I'm not saying don't think about it as a brand. That's not the narrative here. I think the narrative here is nothing is ever as good or as bad as it seems. And if you're going to hold something up because you think it's going to be detrimental, sure, you might have a case there. But if it's not going to be detrimental, and maybe you're worried about, it doesn't look right or it doesn't have the right quality or whatever, no one is thinking about it like that. And I mean that politely. Like you have to be thinking, if there's only 24 hours in the day and someone only has 2 eyeballs and 1 brain and they're focused on a screen, maybe 2 screens if they have Netflix on in the background on their phone, you're trying to earn their attention. Do you really think that that is going to be the thing just because it's not up to your brand guideline? I don't know. I probably just offended a whole bunch of creative people listening to this. But I also just go, that's how people behave. We see it in the behavior.
Yeah. Yeah. As you were talking, I was like, oh yeah, great ideas die on creative directors' desks. And sometimes
sorry, creative directors.
We just need to act. A couple other things that came up for me as you were talking, this idea of, the annual plan and having flexibility to change. I think sometimes we think that change or like needing to pivot means that we've failed. Like I see it sometimes in more junior staff. Like if the plan changes, that means there was some failure, but it's not. That's just agility.
If you dig your heels in and don't change, that's failure.
Yeah.
Like by death gripping it and being like, this is happening my way because 6 months ago in a boardroom, we said it was going to happen that way. That is actually the definition of failure. Mm-hmm. Like you'd be insane. It's like you're flying a plane and you see that the plane is about to crash into something. So what? You're just gonna be like, well, that's the course that we charted. And you're just going to let the plane crash into something? Like, what are you talking about? Right? So I think that, yeah, we need to, there is a whole bunch of ego in marketing. And you know what? Me included. Like, and what I mean by that is like, and this is actually what got me interested in like the data and research side of things is, you work in a certain industry. You have a point of view on that industry. Well, what shapes your point of view on that industry? It might be you grew up following the brand. It might be you did the sport, or you know the athletes, or you follow it, or like whatever it is. Those are all signals that are coming in. I think for me, what was really interesting was as I started to look into data points, specifically social data and digital data, that actually gave me a really interesting point of view into a scene that I thought I was deep into. And I identified as a part of it. But what I realized was, holy moly, my point of view of that community is completely different than how people behave in that community. And I think that like once you realize that like just because you're from the action sports community or the fashion community or the outdoor community or the drinkware community or whatever industry that you're in, the home goods, home decor community, just because you've been in the industry for 20 years or 25 years or you grew up, that doesn't mean you know what's going on in that space. And I have the luxury now. We have output hundreds of thousands of pieces of research. And every time I read something, the biggest learning that I have is, oh man, I don't know shit. Like, I think I might have a hypothesis about something, and actually, holy moly, I'm wrong. And so I think that doesn't mean don't have your point of view, don't have your like gut instinct, but I think we should be constantly trying to go, it doesn't matter what I think. It matters what the group of people that we're trying to reach and ultimately sell to thinks. So when I was at Aritzia, we'd be looking at content and some people would be like, I don't like it. And I'd be like, I don't care if you don't like it. Does our girl like it? Because at the end of the day, they're the ones who are keeping us all employed. Right. And so I think about that. Now, we need to have taste. We need to have like our ability to kind of curate. And it's a fine balance, right? We're trying to find a balance between those two things. But I think this ego in marketing of like, we know best, like we all think we're Steve Jobs. Come on. We're not, right? At the end of the day, we're all just trying to earn someone's attention so we can sell them our widget, whether it's sugar water, yoga pants, an iPhone.
What have been some of the biggest surprises that have come out of data over the years?
Oh, holy moly, we're going to need a bigger boat. I think that the overarching thing is everybody lies. And there's a book that I'm constantly yelling about. It's called Everybody Lies. It's by this guy named Seth Stevens-Dewitowitz. He is a former Google data scientist. It is a fantastic read. He's hilarious. It's a book about data, but the way that he writes it isn't about like data analysis. He's telling stories about, how like he talks about his dating life. He talks and then he pulls that into Google search data, et cetera, et cetera. And so for him, he used to work at Google as a data scientist, and his kind of thesis for the entire book is that Google search data is the most important data set in the history of human psychology. Now, that's a bold statement. And the whole point about it is people type things into Google that they will never say out loud to another human being. Now, I think with AI today, with ChatGPT and all these other things, people are putting that into there. So it's similar principle here. And so for me, everybody lies, even when there's no incentive to lie. And so this old phrase of don't listen to what people say, watch what they do rings so true. And I think once you think about the world through that way, you realize that, oh wow, like there are different signals that we can pull in, and then therefore that should change the way that we plan and approach things. So I think that's been like one of the biggest learnings around, you know, marketing in general. And I think we're so lucky that we are at a place now where there are so many different data points that we can count and pull meaning from. I do this all the time when I public speak. I ask, who here is on Facebook? And almost no hands go up. Yet, everyone in that room is on Facebook, whether they want to say it out loud. They are. They have a Facebook account. They probably logged in the last 30 days. They don't want to say it out loud. Do you want to know how I know? Because legally, when Facebook does their earnings calls, they're talking about users. And if those numbers aren't real, that's fraud. Right? And so I'm like, don't listen to what people say, watch what they do. And I think that, yeah, you could apply that to anything. You could apply that to the bike industry. You could apply that to the ski industry. You could apply that to the interior design, home decor industry. Like, you name it. There are all these like little nuances between different things. Yeah.
Okay, here's some questions about social media that loosely tie into data. I feel like in the early days of brands being on Instagram, brands were showing up in the feed, I don't know, like 3 times a day. They had a mandate to just always be in the feed. And then, you know, things got really polished. It became complicated. They started to scale back. We didn't spend as much time in the feed. What's the right amount of content in social? How much content is too much content? And how much polish do you think brands should have on social?
You need to post 2.67 times per day.
Is that a fact?
No, I'm just kidding. No. That's my point. It depends. And I actually think that it actually does, there isn't a number, right? Like, I'm not going to be able to tell you the lottery numbers that allowed Red Bull or Aritzia or any big brand to win the lottery, right? But I think that's the problem, is we as marketers go, tell me what the best practices is and I'll do it, right? And you're kind of like, what? Like, you can't do that. My kind of principle and approach to this is, number one, I do think you need to be always on. Now, always on means in a way that you can sustain. Always on for Red Bull, when I left there in 2016 or 2017, we had 400 social accounts, 200 million followers. We had 1,000 people around the world in our social media management tool, publishing 650 times a day across the network. So that was always on for Red Bull. There are some brands that struggle to get an Instagram post out a day. There's no right or wrong answer. But I think always on could be hourly, always on could be daily, always on could be every 2 days, every 3 days, whatever it is. So number one, I think you need to be always on. You need to figure out what makes sense from an always on perspective for your brand. Because at the end of the day, not everybody has the budget to do what I just said that Red Bull was doing, right? So that's number one. Number two, when you're going to produce something, make sure it has value. And when I say value, I don't mean your shitty, dumbass campaign message. I mean real value. And when I say the word value, what I mean by that, is it information? Is it education? Is it entertainment? Like, think about actual value, not, hey, buy this shoe, right? And so the amount of people in marketing that are just like, oh, what do you mean? It does have value. My new campaign. And you're like, okay, that's not actual value, right?
Newness is the value.
Yeah, exactly, right? Newness isn't value, right? Yeah, it makes people click because we're dopamine addicts and like, we'll do it. But I'm like, that's not actual value. Why these two principles matter? It actually goes back to the behavioral thing that you brought up. So we had this kind of thing where it was like, oh, we're publishing so many times a day. Then there was really polished content. Then the pendulum swung back the other way and we started to see iPhone video everywhere, right? Now, what we're starting to see the rise of is this thing called dark social. So, dark social. For those of you who don't know what dark social is, Dark social basically means people aren't necessarily scrolling the feed anymore. They're in DMs and they're DMing content back and forth. So when I see something awesome, like let's say I see a brand's post and it's awesome, I'm not tagging Amanda in the comments to be like, check this out. Unless it's some contest where it's like, oh, win a trip here. And like, yeah, you betcha. I'll tag as many as you want. What I'm doing is I'm taking that post and I'm sending it, and it might be on Instagram or TikTok, and I'm sending it to you on iMessage or WhatsApp.
I'm doing it on Slack. That's where I share.
On Slack, right? We're constantly sharing stuff around. The challenge for marketers is it's happening in these closed communities. And it's happening in these closed ecosystems, right? So that is fundamentally different. So in my mind, it's not about how do we actually produce something for the feed. It's how do we produce something that gets shared in the DMs? How can I produce something that is so good that the person is trying to share this in their private closed communities with their friends? Now, we're probably going to see our content, maybe the metrics that we look at, views, whatever. We're going to see that stuff. It might start to go down. But if you start to see saves and shares and a lot of these other underlying metrics, and reset, you're going from seeing millions and millions of views to like, you might see 50 shares, but your next post might see 3 shares. That signal right there is like, oh, this was valuable, and people are either reposting it themselves or sharing it because it struck a chord with them. That is signal that people need to look into. And so I think about that from a social perspective. That's a fundamental shift. You heard me talk earlier about how do we stop the scroll? You still need to do that. But how do you stop the scroll and make it so that Amanda wants to share it with her girlfriends or with her partner or with, work colleagues, right? That is really what we're trying to get to as marketers, because if we as marketers can break into those ecosystems, holy moly, we've done a good job for our brand.
Yeah. Obviously Instagram now has insights around saves and shares that are happening directly in the platform. Are there tools that are coming up that make it possible to find out where else these posts are going?
So not necessarily right now that I'm aware of. However, like what can we as brands do for this? Number one, look at the metrics that you can on certain platforms. So whether it's Instagram, I foresee TikTok probably having this. We're going to start to see this. Number two, you'll start to see disproportionate amounts of view counts on things, right? If it gets shared somewhere in a group chat and that person has a big account and then they publicly share it, like you might not be able to explain, like, how did it get to that person for them to kind of reshare it? And then if do what you can from a tracking perspective. So let's say there's something in there that people want to share. If it's a cheat sheet, I don't know what it is. How can you start to track that? You could track that through UTMs if you're actually making people click out to a site. Or how can you make sure that you're set up in a way where you can scan and pull that stuff in, right? So there are different tools that you can use depending on your social media platform, all of that sort of stuff. Social listening obviously is like kind of limited. But even, a Google News alert, like that sort of thing, like just see if media outlets are starting to pick stuff up, whatever, right? Like there are ways that you can loosely do it. It's not a perfect science though, because the whole reason that these things are starting to pop off is because it's like these private communities. They're private for a reason, right? If people know they're being monitored and watched, they might not behave that way. Case in point, surveys, focus groups. That's why this whole idea of Google search and behavioral stuff is stronger than ever.
You talked about this pendulum swing from super polished content to shot on iPhone, super gritty user generated content. Are you seeing the pendulum swing back? What do you think? I've heard a few people say like, oh, if I have to see one more influencer kind of like holding up a product in front of the camera, I'm going to die. Is there a backlash against the gritty iPhone content yet?
I don't know. I think where my brain goes when you say that is I'm like, marketers ruin everything. And then like creators and influencers ruin everything. Which again, I probably just offended a bunch of people, but, I think about, it depends. There is a place for both, right? Like there is a place for that super polished stuff, and there is a place for that super raw stuff. I think what's going to get really, really interesting is what happens when we can't tell if it's real or not. Right? From with AI. So today, we're starting to see, okay, yeah, like that's with AI, it has, the person has 10 fingers on one hand and you're like, okay, that's AI, or like, whatever. What's going to get really, really interesting for us, and this is more broad than marketing, like as a society, what happens when we don't know if it's real or not? Does it matter? Do we care as consumers? Maybe, maybe not, right? Like, there are things where I think about, like, okay, South Park, the TV show. AI could produce episodes of South Park. Now, the creators of South Park would probably be like, no, they couldn't, they're not as funny. I agree with you, but I'm like, you could actually have AI produce an episode of South Park or The Simpsons or whatever and not know that maybe there wasn't humans in there, like, completely animating it. But I think what gets crazy is when you start getting into live action, right? And you start to see some of these AI videos, and you can start to see some of these AI videos, they can mimic the high polished stuff, and they can mimic the gritty handheld, like, Blair Witch iPhone video. Then what happens? I don't know. I think what's going to be interesting is we're probably going to see, my best hypothesis is that we are going to see a massive onslaught of slop, which is, I'm going to say, like, crappy AI content, because that's what happens in the early days. And we're going to see that pendulum open back up, and people are going to be like, oh, well, I used to only be able to produce 10 videos. Now I'm going to produce 150 videos and flood the zone. And a bunch of that stuff is going to perform like shit. And then they're probably going to dial it back and be like, what does quality, like, how are people going to react to this? We don't know yet, because we haven't actually seen how people react to that onslaught of content. And so I think that there are elements of that content, and I think that the way that you produce that content is going to become more and more important than ever before. So what I mean by that, how is it shot? How is it locking people? How is it pulling people in with hooks, visual hooks, audio-based hooks, visual-based hooks? How is it produced? How are you making sure that it isn't too long between another rehook to keep them pulled in, so that they don't just, like, start watching something and, this isn't good enough, and out they go? Now, how that comes to life for content on your phone versus longer form content on Netflix, like, I think we're about to see this, because, like, we're going to get more dialed into what is required to hold someone's attention. And I think AI is actually going to give us the capability to start to see that. So that's a long-winded way of saying I don't know. And I think what we're going to have to, but what I do know is it's going to be really, really important to watch how people react to those things, because we as marketers can control the inputs. We can go from 10 videos to 100 videos to 1,000 videos. I think what's going to be interesting is how are people going to react from a consumption perspective, and which things are they going to be drawn to? And what can we learn about the things that they're drawn to? Is it the character on screen? Is it the way that it was edited? Is it a different format, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah. And I guess the upside of being able, maybe this is exactly what you're saying. If you can produce 100 videos and most of them are slop, but there's one thing that people latch onto, it's a data point.
Absolutely.
And you can get more data points if you're creating more video. But at the same time, you might just turn people off completely and, we'll hit unsubscribe.
Maybe, but I would also make the argument that I think most brands treat organic social completely wrong. They treat it like a billboard. I actually think organic social is a petri dish. And what you actually need to do is increase your volume on organic social. You need to be hammering out content, because I actually don't think followers matter anymore. I don't think it matters how many followers you have for your brand. We are not in the age of social media. We are in the age of interest media. So you can have, we've seen this with TikTok, you can have 0 followers put up a video and it do 1 billion views, right? You don't need to have 100,000 or 200,000 followers. The targeting and the variable is the content. So if you invest in putting all this content out, that's actually you running a whole bunch of tests. And anytime something overperforms, take that, iterate on it, put paid dollars behind it, and do more like that. So I think about, like, what we advise our customers to do constantly is increase the velocity of your content, and have a little bit of structure when you test. Don't just do random stuff, but, like, increase the cadence. And then what you do is you actually look back over the last 12 months and benchmark what is average performance, views, engagements, etc. Now, cool. Let's say, just for the sake of example, our average performance is 50 likes and 10,000 views. Let's just say that. Cool. Now, for the next month, I'm going to increase my content cadence. Anything that performs more than 50 likes and 10,000 views automatically gets $500 put behind it in budget. Why? Because if it overperformed that average, you know it's doing something well. And if you put ad dollars behind it, it's going to find a larger audience. Right? So this is something that I think typically what most brands do is they're like, oh, well, we're shooting this big new campaign. Here's all the stuff that's going to go for paid. Oh yeah, and here you go, social team, by the way, post these. That's insane. That's completely backwards. You're like, here, I'm going to light money on fire first, and then I'm going to turn around and give you the scraps. Like, what you actually need to be doing is producing all this stuff, feeding it organically in, and then anything a little bump above, that's what gets the paid dollars behind it. Right? But we seem to have this all backwards. And I actually think it goes back to like the hierarchy and the ego of marketing departments. The performance marketing team, and I'm going to piss off some performance marketers, they're like, I matter because I manage this huge spend. And it's like, yeah, but without the content and the creative, you don't have anything to post.
So do you think there's still a place for high budget campaigns? Or do you think it should just be quick turn?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think there's a space for high budget campaigns. I just think that they should be validated. Those high budget campaigns should come from a signal of performance from the group of people that you're trying to reach. So case in point, Raw 100. We spent $1,000. We saw some performance and then we poured gas on it. It's the same thing. You can test ideas and then continue to iterate when you get good signals back from the market. And that actually makes the business case easier to go up the chain. So, if let's say you do have kind of like the overlord that is the CFO or the COO who's like not letting you spend, if you can show, hey, we had this idea for a concept, we tested it, it overperformed our average for the last 12 months here, I want to go out and do more of this. You think a CFO is gonna be like, no, sounds like a bad idea. Like, it's actually making your business case for you. Right? So these are things where I'm just like, oh my gosh, I think there is so much that can be unearthed from this. And if anything, you need to increase the velocity of output of content and use that as the testing dish and then use that to get more budget because it's actually proven by the people that you're trying to reach who buy your product.
Yeah, I've seen this recently, and I just had a conversation earlier this week with the owner of Belly Welly, a brand that we've done some work with and that I've invested in. Katie, the owner, she spends every single day in the aisles of Walmart filming content for their TikTok every day. And some of it's ridiculous. It's just fun. They're doing fun, silly skits, but sometimes those skits get 15 million views and they just keep cranking them out and it's really working. Well, they're lo-fi.
Okay.
It works.
Look what you just said. Sometimes those dumb little skits get 15 million views. Those dumb little skits are bigger than most campaigns.
And they're having a direct correlation to retail sales.
So I guess my question is, are they actually dumb little skits or is that marketing?
Yeah.
That's, I think, the question, right? Like, we sit in our ivory towers of marketing being like, oh, the campaign and the like, da-da-da-da-da. Yeah. I don't know. That's awesome. That is so cool.
I love it. Okay, there's so much more that I want to ask you. So I'm going to jump to the next question.
Which fire away.
You have built several social teams now. What do you think is the makeup of the perfect social team? What pieces need to be in place for it to work?
Yeah, I think this is something that I struggled with when I was, sitting in that seat. I still have a lot of friends that sit in those seats. And it was tough because platforms come and go, right? And like, how do you structure it and how do you title it? So what I landed on, and it worked really well, was structuring the team by function, not just by job title. And so building the team around the work that needs to get done. And so the kind of 4 functions that I use, number 1 is publishing, right? So like scheduling content, both organic and paid, if that team is kind of structured in that way. You then need a content team, and that content team is responsible for creating stuff as well as like working with the publishing team to kind of learn. Then there's the community side of things. So community could be working with creators, working with ambassadors, working with like external press, etc. Like, how can we have community be tied into our social? And then the final piece is analysis or analytics and strategy, right? So like, how are we actually looking at data points and arming those other functions with the feedback signal from what is being done, right? So the publishing team is constantly publishing stuff, operationally scheduling. The content team is producing stuff. Community is working with, maybe it's employee ambassadors, maybe it's creators, maybe it's press, like collabs, etc. That analysis and strategy team is taking the results of all of the activity that the brand is doing and then giving feedback and pointers to each team. Hey, content team, we looked at our content. We noticed this. So next, with your next brief, think about it like this. Hey, publishing team, you're posting this many times. It should be this many times. And have you thought about this format? We actually looked at carousels versus static images versus short form video. Or, hey, video needs to be shot like it needs to be 38 seconds instead of 15 or whatever, right? Like those are kind of random examples. But the reason why you structure the team in this way is everything that I just described happens across every platform. Right? So like Facebook can come and go, TikTok can come and go. You're always going to need these functions, and it allows you to not be like, oh, well, I'm the Vine specialist. RIP, right? Like as soon as that channel isn't relevant anymore, does that person have a job? Whereas these kind of functions are all different type of people as well, right? Like you can, in marketing, the beauty of marketing is there's people who are more artistic and there are people that are more like scientific, right? And so publishing and analysis and strategy, that might be more kind of like scientific, nerdy side of things. Whereas like content and community might be more the kind of like brand, artistic vibe feeling. You need both, right? So this actually helps you start to figure out of what is the makeup of my team and how can I start to find those types of people to fit in there? And then how can I build operationally them working together?
Yeah. So if I'm coming up and I want to work in social media at a brand, it's not about being a specialist in a particular channel. It's really about being a specialist in a discipline and understanding how to apply it across every channel so that as new channels come out, you can be agile and apply that expertise regardless.
Totally. And I think that, so that's not to say don't specialize in a channel. Like if you feel like you have a superpower of going deep in one channel, do that. But yes, like how can you understand all of those functions? And what I would encourage is also, how can you be as T-shaped as possible? So how can you actually have breadth, but also depth, right? Know enough to be dangerous in the other areas, right? So I think, yeah, the overarching theme there is just never stop learning. And it's tough. This stuff changes every single day, right? Like to your point, some of the stuff that Instagram rolled out from an analytics perspective that came out last week or the week before, like that stuff wasn't here. So you're constantly having to stay on top of it. But if you're listening to this podcast, it probably means you're either working in marketing or want to work in marketing. You actually like that. Whereas, finance people might be like, oh, a new thing? No, I'd rather play with my calculator.
I wouldn't mind playing with a calculator sometimes. Okay, we've talked about social a ton, but like I said, nowadays you're deep in the world of data and specifically this concept of Outsite.
Yep.
Talk to us about Outsite. What do you wish every CMO understood about Outsite?
Yeah. So I think Outsite on it, like, let's talk about the definition. The definition in the dictionary of Outsite is the act of perceiving external signals. So when we think about that as marketers, how can we actually take these external signals around us and start to make better marketing decisions for our business? So some of those external signals could be the target audience we're trying to reach. Now, when I say the word target audience, I'm not talking about our customers. Our customers are our customers. I'm talking about people like our customers who aren't yet our customers. That's how we would define target audience. So what can we learn about how that group of people behaves, right? Because that's who we're trying to reach. That would be one group. What can we learn about our competitors? Now, when I say the word competitors, I mean direct competitors and I mean indirect competitors. So direct competitors, we'll use Aritzia as an example. They would compete with Zara and Lululemon and J. Crew and Club Monaco and, all of that. Cool. Direct competitors. They sell a similar product or service to us. Indirect competitors might be Aesop, Glossier, BuzzFeed, Girlboss, etc. Right? So now those indirect competitors don't sell the same product or service to us as us, but they are trying to reach that same person that we are trying to reach. So we are competing with them for attention. So that would be a second bucket, would be competitors. Third would be around culture. What is happening in the world around our brand that we need to know about, right? And what are so there might be things. It could be something in the news. It could be something in the charitable world. It could be, there's no shortage of cultural things happening in the world every day. And the last piece we talk about is content. And content kind of touches all of those, right? There's content that the audience is consuming. There's content that competitors are creating. There's content that's being created around all these different cultural moments. And so this idea of looking externally and being able to harness that external point of view is what we call outside. Now, for the last 10 or 15 years in marketing, we've been told, look at your data. Look at your data. Cool. I'll be clear here. Look at your data. Look at your own stuff. Look at who follows you on social. Look at who comes to your site. Look at who subscribes to your email newsletter. That's great, but that's like you have one eye covered. You're only looking internally. So, marketers love dashboards. We love looking at our dashboards. Dashboards give us the illusion of control. It's not actually what's happening in the world around our brand. And so this concept of outside, what I wish that more CMOs knew is that there's all this signal out there that previously was really, really hard to count and pull meaning. And every day there's more and more data points being created and more tooling coming online that allows us to count and pull meaning from those signals that allow us to make better business decisions for our brand.
Yeah. Okay. On the topic of signals, you are out and looking at what's happening in the world of marketing all the time.
Yep.
What campaigns are you loving right now?
Yeah, really good question. There's so many. There's two that come to mind, and I feel like this is probably going to come out of left field for people listening to this. Twitch. So, okay, Taco Bell and Peloton on Twitch. Those are two campaigns. Now, you probably didn't think I was going to say Taco Bell unless you love Crunchwrap Supremes.
I do.
Not saying. Well, yeah. Actually, give me enough drinks, and yeah. Actually, you know what? No drinks. I'll a Crunchwrap Supreme. So, Taco Bell, super fascinating. 30% of their social ad budget goes onto Twitch. That is an ungodly amount of money.
Wild.
Right? You would never think on its face that 30% of their budget in the world of Instagram and TikTok and YouTube, 30%, almost a third of it is going to Twitch. So what they're actually doing is they're doing this around late night streams. And it's when people are binge watching these streamers.
They know their audience.
And what do they want? And so again, I go back to the classic Warren Buffett or Charlie Munger quote, fish where the fish are. Taco Bell's like, we don't we'd love to have the big campaign that runs on XYZ thing, but they're like, the people that spend money in our establishment are people who are up late at 1 a.m. watching Twitch streamers, and we want to give them that Crunchwrap Supreme.
And they want to crush it.
So that is fascinating. I actually just did a post on LinkedIn recently, like diving into some of the numbers with a video. So that's one is like Taco Bell and Twitch. I was just like, what is this? This is so random. But then when you think about it, you go, oh, that makes sense. And then when you look into the behavior behind it, you're like, well, duh. So that's number one. Number two is Peloton. And so what Peloton has done, and again, I love this signal, is Peloton with connected fitness. They're not spending as much as Taco Bell. They're spending about 11% of their social ad budget. But what they're doing is they're leaning into the default nuances and context of Twitch as a platform. So Twitch as a platform is known for competitive gaming. That's where you would watch competitive gaming streams. So what Peloton has leaned into is they go, oh, okay, how can we lean into this competitive gaming culture and reach guys, primarily men, right, who watch competitive gaming. They want to stay fit. And instead of going to the gym, those people who typically are watching streams might not want to go outside a lot, but how can we lean in and reach those people there? And they still want to stay fit and do that in the privacy of their own home. That's a really interesting place for us to go fishing as a brand, fish where the fish are. Mm-hmm. So why I love these is because, to your point, they know exactly who they're trying to reach and who they're not trying to reach. Now, I could see some marketers being like, spray and pray, put it everywhere. Everyone can be a Peloton customer. Sure. But what I think is what they've done is they've used Outsite to get an idea of where people spending time that we are trying to reach and how can we as a brand create an experience that shows up in a way that is native to the platform, that feels natural, right? So they're not taking their 6 p.m. TV news spot and ramming that down like a Twitch stream. They're actually creating content specifically that's designed to show late at night. So it's like in context. They're being very, very nuanced about it. And I just think it's genius.
I love that. Do you still keep an eye on Red Bull? What do you see them doing?
Of course. A lot of my close friends work there. They're a customer of ours, so we get to see it up close. They operate at a level that I don't think most brands can match. And I think one of the things that is so impressive about that brand, and when I worked there internally, we used to talk about this. How do you take a global brand and make it super locally relevant? And I think that they've done a really good job operationally to be able to make that happen. So, the way Red Bull comes alive in the Canadian market versus Brazil versus Germany versus the UK, they are able to take that brand and make it hyper locally relevant in the scenes that they're trying to be in, the places that they're trying to show up. And they do a really good job at building relationships with opinion leaders in all of those spaces. And then they insert their kind of brand DNA there. So, Red Bull gives you wings. How does it push humanity forward? How does it elevate people to do things and be the best version of themselves? And they do that by working with the right groups of people. So I think all of that is like super, super fascinating. The other thing is they treat their content like a product. It's not just a marketing asset, right? Like it's not a disposable campaign. What they're doing is they're putting so much care into what they produce. And I used to joke about this all the time. Whether or not you buy the product in a 7-Eleven, you're going to spend time with our brand because we are going to provide you with so much value in following us. You might never touch an energy drink, but you're going to watch our content and you're going to go, whoa, that was cool. Or, whoa, that was funny. Or, oh, I'm going to share this in my DMs with my friends. That's crazy. Look what Red Bull just did, right? And they do that across all the different things that they do from a content perspective. And I think more brands need to learn from that, right? Because, again, what's marketing's job? Keep the brand top of mind until the person is ready to buy. The way that you keep your brand top of mind until someone's ready to buy isn't every 2 days saying, hey, you want to buy this? Hey, you want to buy this? Hey, this is new. Hey, this is on sale. Yet most brands do that, right? So.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so smart. I mean, I am that textbook example of someone that consumes Red Bull regularly, but has never had the drink. Like I consume content constantly. I do wonder, like the scale that Red Bull is doing content, do they see the value in it? Obviously they do. Obviously, like the brand couldn't do what they do if that tactic wasn't working.
It's a very long-term strategy, right? It's a long-term strategy that you need to have leadership from the C-suite down. So that's another thing is like some brands will say, oh, we want to be the Red Bull of XYZ. And you're like, that's cute. Do you understand what the level of investment is that's needed to do that? And it's not just like, oh, do it for 6 months. It's like decades and decades of doing this. So, it is a fundamental strategic kind of like line in the sand where they're going, whether you buy our product or not, you will spend time with us. Mm-hmm. But that also is like the core of brand building, right? If we weren't allowed to talk about our product, what would we say? This is something that I think so many marketers need to do with their teams. It's a Friday afternoon. People don't want to work. Get them into a brainstorm, take them out of the office, go brainstorm and go, okay, if we weren't allowed to talk about the product or service that we sell, what would we say? It's a really great exercise to do. And then once you come up with a great list where you're like, yeah, then start to go, how can we start to increase this stuff in our outputs? So I'll give an example. When I was at Aritzia, we were talking about clothing. We were also talking about design and architecture and music and vibes. And you know what? You need that so that the only thing that people see, so that the only people that people don't see is, hey, buy now, buy now, buy now, buy now. Instead, it's like, oh, check out this playlist. Oh, check out this like cozy vibes thing. Oh, here's our guide on, travel to this city or whatever. We need this editorial outlet. And I think most brands don't actually do a good job of truly investing in that editorial aspect. They'll cut off a little bit of budget and be like, okay, we did it. And it's like, no. That's actually the strategy. You need to be like, why will people spend time with us to begin with? And then, yeah, by the way, hopefully they buy your product. So you need to have a bunch of things go right from like a product perspective. But yeah, I just think if it's a very simple thing. If we weren't allowed to talk about our product or service, what would we say?
Yeah, that's great advice. And I learn something from you every single time we chat, Charlie, but I'm sure you've also been on the receiving end of advice. You definitely give some great advice. What is the best piece of marketing advice you've ever been given?
I don't know if I have one. I think, I've already said some of them. So fish where the fish are. That just like makes a ton of sense to me. Don't listen to what people say. Watch what they do because everybody lies. And then I think like in today's day and age, start with the audience that you're trying to reach, work backwards, obsess over distribution because distribution I think is what matters most in today's world. And you can have amazing content or creative, but without reach, it's a secret, right? So I think more marketers need to obsess over distribution. And this is actually something that I was talking to a friend who works in brand, and I'd actually be curious your take on this. So I actually think distribution strategy is brand strategy. And I think that the kind of old way of thinking about brand was like, what is our brand story and what is our brand pillars, right? And so my big example of this is when people are going, we'll use travel. Most people type in Barcelona Hotel, not Barcelona Marriott or Barcelona Fairmont. Yeah, there's some people that type in Barcelona Marriott or Fairmont if you're like bougie and fancy like that. But most people are actually typing in Barcelona Hotel, which means that they're then getting taken to either Google Travel Booking, Expedia, like all these different places across the internet. They might not even be taken there. They might be sitting in OpenAI or just Google, right? So what does that mean for us as a brand? Does our brand story actually matter? Or is our brand strategy actually figuring out how can we show up to where people are and how they make decisions? So I don't know. I think it's a really interesting thing that we're going to have to navigate because, again, now behavior is actually shaping how we approach. I'm not saying throw out those principles, but it challenges things.
As a fellow Simon Fraser University grad, and my program was heavily influenced by another Canadian, Marshall McLuhan, who would say the medium is the message. Yep. I think, you're kind of capturing a sentiment that he doubled down on, which is like where you show up is half of it. It tells a story where you show up. And I think your Twitch example is perfect. It is saying something about the brand that they are on those platforms and meeting people where they're at it shapes your brand. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. I like to joke that you are my most famous marketing friend because you have a following, and I'm sure anyone that has just listened to this will want to hear more. Where is the best place for people to find you, Charlie?
Yeah, the best place is LinkedIn. It's just my name on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active there. You'll hear me probably yell a whole bunch of the stuff that we've yelled about today. I'm slow with DMs. DM me. I will respond. I'm just a little slow. I'm working on it getting better. I'm on other platforms, but I'm not as active there. So LinkedIn is the best place to find me.
Thanks so much. This is great.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.